And then, number 2, think clearly. This is, of course, a rather old chestnut, but I think it will bear bringing to your notice yet again. But perhaps I should phrase it rather differently. Perhaps I should phrase it in more traditional terms. Let's say, not so much think clearly, but cherish right view. You notice I don't say cherish perfect vision. That would be rather premature, because there's no perfect vision without right view. Right view is the mundane form of perfect vision. Perfect vision is the transcendental form or counterpart of right view. So unless you have right view, you've very little chance of achieving perfect vision. And that's why right view is so very important. The Buddha has all sorts of things to say about right view. Well, the Buddha didn't distinguish between right view and perfect vision, at least he didn't distinguish linguistically. He always spoke in terms of samaditi or samyak drishti, but it's quite clear from the context whether he's talking about the mundane variety or the transcendental variety. Right view is important because wrong view leads downward. There's a term in Pali which is niraya, meaning downward. It's the downward path. If you entertain, and especially if you cling to and insist upon wrong view, you are very definitely on the downward path. You're heading down. You're in decline, as it were. So, right view is of very great importance. As I've said, no right view, no perfect vision. And no perfect vision, of course, no liberation. No liberation, no enlightenment, no nirvana, no real spiritual progress. So in order to cherish right view, we have to learn to think. We have to learn to reason. And sometimes I'm surprised how difficult people seem to find it just to think. I'm not even speaking of thinking clearly. So often we're just under the influence of, swayed by, our emotions, and very often are rather negative emotions, and we're not aware of this. We're not aware that we're not really thinking. But we have to think, we have to learn to think, and we have to learn to think clearly. We have to learn to reason correctly. Some time ago, Subhuti, who is sitting somewhere here in the midst of you all, I'm sure, Subhuti had some weekends for, I hope I've got this right, for the study and possibly the practice of logic. He had some logical weekends. And I do know that those who attended them, at least I believe those who attended them, found them very, very useful. And perhaps it was a pity that they couldn't be continued. I'm not, of course, blaming Subhuti here, but perhaps others who know a little bit about logic could restart them. Perhaps at Vajrakuta, we could have weekends devoted to how to think, how to reason. Because Vajrakuta, as you know, I'm sure Kamalashila is not going to mind this little bit of publicity. Vajrakuta is dedicated to the study of the Dharma. But there's not much point in studying the Dharma if you can't even think. And especially if you can't even think clearly. So I think that really, logically and psychologically, comes first. So perhaps we should have, whether at Vajrakuta or elsewhere, a few weekends devoted to how to think, how to reason correctly. We have arts weekends and arts events and even arts retreats, which is fine, but we mustn't neglect the other side of things also. One of the things we need to do in this connection, of course, is to understand the meaning of the words we use. Sometimes we use words very loosely, very inaccurately. We don't ask ourselves the meaning of the words that we ourselves are using. Singadevi yesterday adverted to this matter of jargon. And of course very often our speech is laden with jargon from various sources, and that does not conduce to clarity. So let us understand the meaning of the words we use. And when we write, let's check on the meaning of the words that we use. Let's consult the dictionary. The most useful book in the world, I think, is really the dictionary, leaving aside the scriptures. Yeah? Huh? If I was ever to be invited on Desert Island Discs, and if I was to be asked which book I would take with me, to my desert island, I would definitely say a dictionary. Not just any old dictionary, not Collins, which was referred to yesterday, not even the Oxford Concise. I'd take Dr. Johnson's dictionary. Because it's not only a very, very good dictionary, it not only defines words really beautifully and precisely, it also contains examples of how you use, or how writers, especially poets of the past, have used. So it's also an anthology of little poetic extracts, which shows you how the words are used, shows you the words in actual literary, sometimes scientific context. So yes, understanding the meaning of the words you use. And if someone uses a word that you don't understand, or if you're not quite sure of the meaning that the person attaches to that particular word, if it's an ambiguous word, ask for clarification. Otherwise, you may be discussing or arguing at cross purposes. Yeah? Nowadays, I hardly need to tell you, so many wrong views are around. Yeah? Wrong views are pouring in upon us all of the time from our surroundings. Open the newspapers, wrong views. Read a book recently published, more likely than not, you'll encounter wrong views. Talk to someone outside the FWBO, listen to a political speech, listen to a speech on literature, listen to a speech or lecture on almost any topic, and you'll encounter wrong views. And we live in the midst of this society. We can't cut ourselves off from it completely. And we cannot help but be affected. But we must be on our guard against this. We must realize that many of the views that we encounter are views which are really quite inconsistent with the Dharma. And we therefore have to be very much on the alert. All the more reason, therefore, to be able to think clearly, to reason correctly, and to understand the meaning, the real meaning of words used. It's especially important that we don't mix up some of the things we hear about, or some of the ideas, even the ideologies with which we come into contact directly or indirectly. It's very important that we don't mix them up with the Dharma. It's all very well to try to speak the language of contemporary life, but we have to be very careful that when we try to speak that language, we don't get ourselves misled and start even thinking in those contemporary terms which are inconsistent, not only with clarity of thought, but with right view itself. So be very, very wary. Be very, very wary of favourite, fashionable ideas and ideologies and isms and so on, and stick to the Dharma. Yes, we can express the Dharma in relatively straightforward, English language up to a point. But be very careful when we start using words and expressions and even borrowing whole philosophies and semi-philosophies from sources which really are very different from and inimical to the Dharma itself.